What do we do to break down barriers to trust between people who have a history of marginalization and healthcare professionals? What do we do to build a culture of trust between communities that have been hit hardest by legacies of exclusion and all of our systems? How is exclusion experienced? What does it look like for me? What does it look like for you? Regardless of your education, your status, your race, your job. How do these systems harm you? How do we fix them? Whose experiences do we ground our solutions in? Whose experiences do we ground our policies and our programs and our practices and our research in? How do we heal? What does healing look like? These are the questions that our project explores, the Health Equity Activation Team.
For this project, we brought together a group of context and content experts to take a deep dive.
The opportunity with Heart was to stop suppressing engagement by building trusting and caring relationships with researchers, clinicians, and community members to begin to generate participatory knowledge creation. So we learned that wellness and health have different meanings for different people, as well as different access and opportunities and treatment for different people and populations. And that was hard for me. I mean, I always knew it, right? But COVID exacerbated it at the community level. The numbers spoke volumes.
Yeah, and I think we know that different economic conditions, different environments, different family and community experiences, those all change what's available to you and what the expectations are of what healthcare looks like. But I don't think we knew fully how powerful the two-way dynamic of that is. That when the expectations of the person in the healthcare system and the person trying to access some healthcare, when they don't match, just how far off that experience can be.
Is the healthcare system meeting the expectations of our community?
My wife very recently came too close to death because while the resident physician caught what was going on, the attending in the ER blew her off. At which point, my wife, who is not nearly as outspoken as I am, went, "If they're not worried about it, why should I?" Here we are, trying to change things in a system that right now I have zero faith in.
I remember when I was a resident, having to remind myself and do a little centering if it was the middle of a long night, and remind myself that patients weren't coming to the ER to be admitted to give me pain.
That's right.
It wasn't just to bother me and hurt me, even though it didn't feel good at the time, but they were just looking for help. And I'd have to center myself for that. Well, when it happens over and over and over again, you lose your center.
You lose your center.
How do you remind yourself that the community is not against you? How do you build trust?
If we were not in this program together and I was not growing and sharing this space with you all, in my career, I'd be a lot more apathetic. I'd be a lot angrier. And I think I would not care about doing little things for people as much.
Nice.
I think I'd be more what I call checked out mentally.
Wow. So what else we realized was that as COVID hit, the anchor institutions paused, the community paused, but because the community organizations are smaller and more nimble, we were able to pivot.
How could we direct some support to help those smaller organizations that have the relationships get the work going. You know, what do we need to do? Things that we wouldn't have thought of, like how do you keep Ripple, a community center that supports people who are experiencing homelessness, how do you keep them open when they have only volunteers? How do you make sure that there's a place for people to go? How do you make sure, what's the organization that's what needs to happen at a place like Treatment Trends when half the staff are out for COVID? How do you stay open so that you can treat people's addictions? And then there was PNLB.
Have you valued your community's grassroots organizations' ability to pivot, to build trust, and to mobilize the community through relationships?
I'm really excited about this group and this idea of taking research and power back into the space of the community itself to try to imagine how to change that power structure to make the voice of a group like this be the power itself to actually try to make the change. Because up until now, I mean, I'm not that old, but I'm in my 40s. Up until now, it's not ever been that. The power is where the power sits, and I've not really seen it be able to, beyond like a community or grassroots sort of effect, which are very powerful and make a lot of change locally. I've not really seen that spread to like national sort of stage. But maybe I'm just naive.
I think the other thread from PNLB, and maybe this comes a little bit before COVID, but became even more clear, was the leadership without limits. That we had seen success from PNLB of building leadership and building leaders where other people don't expect to see them.
The leaders that people don't typically consider leaders, right?
Right.
So bringing about and supporting non-traditional leaders through essentially that a support system, as well as the development and creating a realistic, tangible vision of what are the steps to achieve the dreams that I have to give back to my community.
Does leadership look like you?
People with the lived-in experiences, we still have a barrier because you need your GED to become a CRS or CFS. So basically, where does our experience matter if we don't have that GED? Like, that barrier should have been removed because there's a lot of people that have the experience and they can't get credit for it. But everyone else is living off their credit. And like, that irks me. People go into these centers, they get released, and when they try to reach back in to ask a question, no one's available because no one's getting a check for them. And like, who's really doing the work? Everyone talks about outreach and being out there and giving stuff, but no one's really building relationships. And I say this for a fact because I'm out there every day on Sunday Street. I go out there and I build relationships. I build bridges, not just a little path and say, hey, what's up here? Take this, take that, take this. I want to know your name. I want to know where you're going to be at Monday through Saturday. That way, if I don't see you, I know something's wrong with you and I go looking for you.
And in COVID, I think the avalanche of moral injury for healthcare providers really became an issue. Well, what do we do to support healthcare providers? Because they can't provide compassionate care when they're suffering too much too. When they can see, when you think about Alex's story about being a resident, learning to be a doctor during the COVID, this third wave of COVID, and she sees somebody who needs to be put on a ventilator, and she said, I have to go tell their family that they're never gonna see this man again. And what is that like for her as someone who's just developing her skill set in medicine, amazing as she is, that's her training experience, is telling people, be prepared.
How do we support healthcare workers' emotional intelligence through their education?
One guy was screaming, I can't breathe, this is it, I'm dying. And I agreed with him. He was on his way to the ICU. And so we sat down and FaceTimed his wife together. They said their last words together, and then we had to intubate him. So I'm sitting for these conversations with these people who I've never met before and having this like life-changing moment with them, right? The husband and a wife, like this is a love that's being lost, and I'm supposed to sit there and facilitate that conversation with really no training. And as someone who's experienced death, I remember my father passed away in a hospital. I never got to say goodbye. And so I relive that every day.
Has healthcare forgotten how to connect with the community?
My body officially broke about 8 years ago. And prior to that, I will tell you that I didn't have regular checkups or visits. And I didn't go see the doctor as often as I should have. However, the most frustrating aspect of it all, 8 years ago, trying to learn what was going on with myself and trying to understand the language that these doctors spoke, and also trying to deal with the manner in which sometimes I was made to feel because they didn't understand either what I was experiencing or whatever other reasons. I won't make excuses for them. However, it was very frustrating to feel like wellness and quality health care were a luxury, when in fact it isn't. It's an absolute necessity.
So the other thing we learned is that, and we already knew it, but COVID, I think, really solidified it in this work, is that people go into healthcare because they want to make a difference.
Right.
People don't choose to go into healthcare to hurt people. Yeah.
Not at all. And when we find we don't have tools that work, there's damage, and then how do we respond?
That's right.
How do you grow into that?
What is your why?
When people come together, change happens. Whether we're talking about individuals, whether we're talking about families, patients, clinicians, and that's really what it's all about, is how do we build a society based on communication and relationships.
And I think one of the things I've learned from you and this project has made a lasting impact is nothing about us without us.
That's right.
So as our hospitals are moving toward health equity, we need to be there as community to say nothing about us without us. Listen to us. We have some of the answers. We have experiences that need to be accounted for.
Yeah, and it's cost effective, and it will change and improve healthcare across the whole community.
We all want the same thing. We want a health system that works for all of us.
That's right.
We learned that across difference, we all have humanity within us. That educational degrees don't define us, that positional power doesn't define us, that race, age, language, country of origin, family of origin does not define us. That we all want to be healthy, we all want to support wellness, we all want to care about the people that we love and see what's best for them, and that we all want to be able to trust our healthcare providers, and we all want voice. We want to contribute and be experts within the systems, the policies, the practices, and the providers that are going to impact our lives.